Hello, class. I wanted to send a video note about, or a message about intelligence and intelligence testing. And I want to start by just discussing a question here. So first, when we think about defining intelligence, wow, do we think about so many different avenues? Like some might say it's how smart someone is. Someone else might say intelligence means being able to learn fast or how well you might do. And how we define intelligence like that and how we actually measure intelligence with IQ tests differ. IQ tests measure logical and analytical reasoning skills. It's based on convergent reasoning, which means that you converge on a correct answer, whereas divergent reasoning is when you create multiple solutions to solve a single problem. And with convergent reasoning, you have a problem and you converge on one solution. And that's really the type of reasoning that IQ tests look at. The Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale is the IQ test that's really the leading one. And the Wechsler has two main subscales, the verbal scale and the performance scale. And the verbal scale will ask the participant to respond verbally in essence. So they can't write anything down with their hands, they can't figure anything out. So math problems, solving math problems is on the verbal scale because it's all mental math. And there's vocabulary exercises on the verbal scales. There's many different things, different scenarios on the verbal scale. But the bottom line is with the verbal scale, you answer verbally. And the bottom line is you can't use your hands to figure anything out. The performance scale is different. With a performance scale, you do use your hands. You might arrange puzzles. You might arrange pictures in a logical sequence. You might do something similar to tangrams where you have blocks. There's red blocks and black blocks and red and black blocks. And you have an image. You have to quickly reproduce the image. All of us could do the things on the performance scale if we had enough time, but you're scored on the performance scale with speed and accuracy. So the bottom line with IQ test is that IQ tests measure logical and analytical reasoning skills. Through those two subscales, the verbal scale where you respond verbally, like increasing vocabulary questions or math problems, and the performance scale where you use your hand to manipulate objects. I want to back up just a little bit, and I want to talk about then what an IQ score would mean. And to do that, we have to talk about a couple of things. One is standardization. IQ tests are standardized tests. And what that means is they're given, they're scored, and they're also interpreted in the same way, no matter who takes it, no matter where they take it, etc. So there's a script that you use for IQ tests. There, you go by that script, and the standardization of them is that you can't leave that script, because if so, you've broken standardization. So if you've ever taken the SAT or the ACT or even a performance assessment in high school, you may have taken, likely have taken, a standardized test. The bottom line is they're standardized. They're administered, they're scored, and they're interpreted in the same way, no matter who takes it. The second quality of IQ test is that they are normed, N-O-R-M-E-D, normed. And what that means is the IQ test is given to an extremely large group of people, and what's similar to the people is they're given per age group, per chronological age group. So it's year and month of your age. And so psychometricians who design these tests give them to large sample populations, but they're connected by age group. And then the mode, or the most common score, the modal score, is set at a theoretical score of 100. So the score of an IQ test of 100 doesn't mean the person got 100%. it does mean that the person is average for his or her age group. So I want to show you the theoretical distribution. Let's see if I can pull it up. There we go. So this is the IQ score distribution, which is also, you probably recognize it as the standard bell curve. And what you see here is that 68 is actually 68.26%, if I'm going to be extremely precise, will score in this range. So this is an IQ score of 100, which means average for his or her chronological age group, and 115 is slightly above average for the chronological age group, and a score of 85 means slightly below average for the chronological age group, because the IQ score tests are normed, which means your score compares you to your chronological age group. Then if we go out what's called another standard deviation, you don't have to understand that, but if you've had statistics, it might make sense. And in the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, one standard deviation equals 15 points. If you haven't had stats, who cares about that? Then it's two standard deviations is 130, an IQ score of 130 or an IQ score of 70. And two standard deviations above or below the score of 100, which is average for the age group, warrants a title, so to speak, of people who score that. With the 130 IQ score, people will be eligible for gifted programs. And what that means in K-12 schooling, for schools that offer gifted programs, is that the child has scored 130 or higher on the IQ test. Number two, that the child has had an assessment by their family, by their parents, and by their teacher. Number three, the child has a staffing meeting with the guidance counselor, the child's family has a staffing meeting with the teacher and the guidance counselor, and then the determination is made. So many times, very high achieving parents who want their kids to have that label will become confused or dismayed or discouraged if they score like 128. And they might say something like, they're only 2 points off. That's actually not accurate. They're 2 normed points off, which could be several questions, because that means with a normed score, it's comparing them to their chronological age group. A score of 2 standard deviations below 100 for the chronological age group would put you at a score, put an individual at a score of 70, and that has been associated with the label intellectual disability. It used to be called mental retardation, but because the word retardation or retard has become a colloquialism that people use to kind of put people down, the field of psychology changed that name in 2013 in May 22nd, and labeled it as an intellectual disability. In other words, the person has an IQ score 2 standard deviations or more below what is average for his or her chronological age group. So that is what norming in essence means. But I also want to discuss with you some concepts related to intelligence and intelligence testing. Okay, so we've talked about intelligence testing. A high IQ score really doesn't guarantee anything. It is just a measurement of logical and analytical reasoning skills. Someone has to, sometimes people have a tendency to overemphasize the meaning of a high IQ score. And no one says it better than Robert, who goes by Bob Sternberg. So Robert Sternberg, let's call him Bob. Bob Sternberg, as a young kid, when he was in the 4th grade, was not doing very well. When he was in the 5th grade, wasn't doing very well. And the teachers had him take the IQ test in the class prior. So when he was in 5th grade, he took it with the 4th graders. And he was told that he was taking it with the 4th graders because school wasn't his thing. He wasn't doing very well in school. He was, not very smart, so to speak. And so he was brought to the prior class. He's in his older years now, so that was some time ago. And what happened with Sternberg is he became really curious about this thing that he was told he didn't have, which he identified as intelligence. And so he took an IQ test, obviously, and he was on the low average end. He decided that intelligence is more than logical analytical reasoning, and he started researching that. He actually dedicated his career toward that, and as a professor at Stanford University and Yale University, a Harvard professor as well, he was a shining star that represented that IQ tests are simply one indicator. It is not the be all end all, it is one indicator. He devised the triarchic, meaning 3 arches, theory of intelligence. He said, okay, fine, logical analytical reasoning is one of them, but what about creativity? Because creativity is not measured in a traditional IQ test. Creativity requires you to diverge multiple solutions to a problem, not converge on one answer. And he said also, what about common sense? He called that practical intelligence. And he said, common sense isn't measured on a logical analytical reasoning IQ test. And so he looked at those 3 arches of intelligence, and he looked at the extent to which we can have logical analytical reasoning intelligence, and many of us do to varying extents, creative intelligence, many of us do to varying extents, and practical intelligence, many of us do to varying extents. And he said that there can be overlap, but that typically we'll have our own strengths in those 3 intelligences. And so he broadened our understanding and was motivated from his own life experience, where he was brought up in the school system not feeling very intelligent. He actually started teaching one of his classes at an Ivy League school, and said, he noted that he is Bob Sternberg with a low average IQ score, that most of the students would have a traditional IQ score higher than him, and then he would just press forward. He was also president of the American Psychological Association, so he's an incredible, compelling person. He shares that he got a grade of C in general psychology, and he also shares that grades do not define an individual's intelligence, neither would scores like an IQ score. He's incredibly compelling. I hope that that helps capture that intelligence is so much more than a measurement on one test. So as researchers in the field of psychology, many researchers look at, well, is intelligence nature, which is biological, genetics, or nurture, which is environment? And the truth is, the research supports that it's both. It's nature and nurture. But researchers tend to vary on which one weighs in more. Many people believe, we went through time where we believed it was nurture. We believed that the environment is what cultivated intelligence. And now we're in a time where we have a tendency through the research to believe it is more nature or biological, but we measure that through correlation coefficients. And I just want to show you some of that research to take a look at it. So the association between nature and nurture, if we look at the correlation of identical twins who are, let me make sure I shared that screen. Hold on a second. Let's see. Hold on just 1 second. I think I might have misshared the screen. There we go. Okay, I think we're back in business. So if we look at the association between nature, biology, nurture, environment, and look at the way it's measured today, we will see that nature, biology, actually weighs in more. So let's take a look at this. So if we look at the IQ scores, if we have identical twins, and we have identical twins who are separated at birth, and we study that in multiple identical twin pairs who were separated at birth, the correlation between the IQ score of one twin and the IQ score of the other twin, and when we group that together and cluster it together overall with the groups of twins, it's plus 0.60. So nature, because they were separated by environment, so they didn't share nurture, they shared nature only, plus 0.60 is a pretty strong indicator. And then if we look at identical twins raised together, so they shared genetics, which is a plus 0.60, and they also shared environment, we only see it increase by plus 0.26. So that led researchers to conclude the correlation between nature and intelligence is stronger than nurture and intelligence. because the second statistic includes both nature and nurture, and this includes nature only. The second way it's measured is clear sometimes for some people to see, that the association between nature and nurture, if we have all siblings, whether it's an identical twin pairing or a fraternal twin pairing or non-twin siblings or non-biologically related siblings, they all are living in their same home. They're raised in their same households. And then we test the IQ of the pairs and then we correlate it together. We see that identical twins reared together, so they're raised together, plus 0.86. And then we see fraternal twins, they're less biologically similar, but they're also raised together, plus 0.60. And then we have non-twin siblings, and the correlation is plus 0.47. And then we have no biology, they're non-biologically related, but they were raised together, plus 0.29. So based on that data, what do we conclude? Researchers have concluded that nature screams louder when we compare correlations. Remember, correlation is just an association, not cause and effect, than environment. So the main takeaway from this is that we measure it by isolating one variable, whether it's nature, using this slide where identical twins, so they're genetically the same or genetically, it's not a very nice way to refer to it, but it's accurate, genetically clone. So identical twins have the same genetics. So in essence, they're a controlled model of genetics, so to speak. I know that sounds kind of weird. And then some were raised together, some weren't. So we varied environment, and genetics was stronger. And when we look at nature and nurture, they all have the same, they were all raised in their home together, the pairings were. Then we see that what drives the change is the biology, the nature. So when nurture is stabilized, we see that nature drives the change. So the bottom line right now is the idea is, based on the current research with these correlations, is that nature, it's both nature and nurture, but nature only is around plus 0.60 and nurture only is around plus 0.29. Therefore, plus 0.60 is the stronger correlation. I hope this video message has been helpful. And maybe stop the PowerPoint slide. I hope it's been helpful. In general, what we covered was general information about standardized, about IQ tests. We noted that they're standardized and that they're normed. We looked at the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale and looked at the two subscales that it has, the verbal scale, which is verbal responses, and the performance scale, which is hands-on. And we evaluated that a little bit. We also addressed the nature and nurture of intelligence and the way that relates. And we looked at the work of Robert Bob Sternberg, and we looked at the ways in which his triarchic theory is more encompassing, because he looks at logical analytical reasoning, creativity, and good old common sense, which he calls practical intelligence. So as a follow-up to that, if we are truly lost in the woods and we're with one person, and when you think about the one person you would pick, would you want someone who can test really well, high levels of logical analytical reasoning skills? Probably not. Would you want an artist who can create multiple beautiful things? Probably not. You would likely want someone with high levels of practical intelligence or common sense to be able to navigate their way out of being lost in the woods. So intelligence and diversity of our intelligences really depends on, and Sternberg defines intelligence this way, being able to learn what you need to do to be successful and what is important to you. And on that note, we will end this video lecture.